Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Before we begin today's story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and tell me your city and state or your country if you're joining us from somewhere else. It's always amazing to see people from all over the world coming together through these stories. Now, settle in, because today's story begins with a woman, $1, and a decision that would change far more than anyone could have imagined. Sometimes, the smallest thing a person owns is the only thing standing between hope and surrender. Naomi Brooks stared at the single-dollar bill in her hand until the edges blurred. It had been folded so many times that the corners were beginning to split, softened by months of being tucked into pockets, wallets, and jacket linings whenever life demanded one last impossible choice. Today, it was all she had left. Exactly $1. Her checking account had 43 cents. Her savings had disappeared 6 months earlier when her 6-year-old son, Caleb, was diagnosed with a chronic respiratory condition that turned ordinary colds into frightening nights spent listening for every breath. Rent was already 4 days late. Her landlord had left another reminder taped to the apartment door that morning, written politely enough to hurt more than anger ever could. The fluorescent lights inside Miller's Market hummed softly above her as customers drifted through narrow aisles carrying baskets filled with groceries they barely glanced at. Naomi's shopping basket held only a loaf of discounted wheat bread, a carton of eggs marked with a bright orange clearance sticker, and a bottle of generic cough medicine Caleb's pediatrician admitted probably wouldn't help much, but was better than nothing. She quietly returned the cough medicine to the shelf after checking the total on the register display. $12.19. She only had $11. The cashier, an older woman named Linda who had worked there longer than anyone could remember, offered a sympathetic smile without saying a word. Naomi appreciated that. Pity spoken aloud always weighed more than silence. She paid for the bread and eggs, slipped them carefully into a reusable grocery bag, then looked down at the lonely dollar still resting in her palm. She should save it for bus fare tomorrow. She should keep it in case Caleb needed juice after school. She should hold on to it because people like her couldn't afford foolish decisions. But then her eyes drifted toward the small rack of scratch-off lottery tickets sitting beside the register. Bright colors, flashing promises, 10 million jackpot, lucky 7, golden fortune. She almost laughed at herself. She had never believed in luck. Luck didn't stay in neighborhoods like hers. Luck didn't climb 4 flights of broken apartment stairs carrying groceries and inhalers. Luck didn't skip dinner so a child could eat first. Yet something inside her whispered that maybe hope sometimes wore ridiculous disguises. $1 ticket? Linda asked gently after noticing where Naomi was looking. Naomi hesitated just long enough to argue with herself. Then she nodded once. Just one. Linda handed her a blue scratch ticket decorated with tiny silver stars. Good luck, sweetheart. Naomi smiled politely, though neither of them truly expected miracles. She picked up the small plastic coin attached to the counter and began scratching away the silver coating. The sound was quiet, soft, almost comforting. She uncovered the first symbol, then the second. Before she could finish revealing the third, a deep voice spoke calmly behind her. I'm sorry. She froze. That scratch ticket belongs to me. The coin slipped from her fingers and landed against the counter with a tiny click. The entire store seemed to inhale at once. Naomi slowly turned around. Standing behind her was a tall black man in a charcoal overcoat tailored so perfectly it looked as though it belonged on the cover of a magazine rather than inside a neighborhood grocery store. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but there was an unmistakable confidence in the way he carried himself. He wasn't angry. He wasn't loud. If anything, his voice had been unusually respectful. That somehow made the words even harder to process. Naomi blinked. Excuse me. The ticket, he repeated quietly, his eyes resting on the half-scratched card. I believe that's mine. Linda looked back and forth between them, confusion spreading across her face. Sir, she just bought it. Did she? The man asked, never raising his voice. Or did we accidentally switch places before the transaction finished? Naomi replayed the last 30 seconds inside her mind. She remembered stepping aside when another customer reached for bottled water near the register. She remembered setting her dollar bill down. She remembered Linda answering a phone call from another cashier. Everything after that suddenly felt strangely blurred. Had someone else stepped closer? Had she moved without noticing? She whispered, uncertainty replacing irritation. The man studied her expression for only a moment before speaking again. I'm Ethan Carter. The name meant nothing to Naomi. Around them, two customers had already stopped walking. Someone quietly pulled out a phone. Linda glanced nervously toward the security camera mounted above the entrance before biting her lip. The camera's been acting up all morning, she admitted under her breath. Ethan nodded once, almost as though he had expected that answer. Then he looked back at Naomi, not with accusation, but with careful curiosity. I'm not asking you to give it to me, he said evenly. I'm asking if you're willing to find out who it truly belongs to. Naomi lowered her eyes toward the unfinished scratch ticket resting between them. $1 had never carried so much weight, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she had the unsettling feeling that neither of them was really talking about the ticket anymore. Naomi looked from the unfinished ticket to Ethan's face, searching for the anger she expected to find. It was not there. His expression remained composed, almost thoughtful, as though he were trying to solve a puzzle rather than win an argument. That unsettled her more than if he had demanded the ticket outright. Linda cleared her throat nervously. Maybe everybody should slow down for just a second. Her fingers hovered over the cash register as though it might somehow provide an answer. I know I handed somebody a blue ticket, but there was another customer standing right over here a minute ago. She pointed toward the end of the counter where a small display of chewing gum and candy bars now stood undisturbed. The customer she remembered had already disappeared. Naomi closed her eyes for a brief moment, replaying every movement. She remembered setting her dollar on the counter. She remembered stepping aside to let someone squeeze past with a shopping basket. She remembered hearing the store telephone ring. The details blurred together like rain running down glass. I honestly do not know, she admitted quietly. If I made a mistake, it was not intentional. Ethan nodded almost immediately. I believe you. The answer caught her off guard. She had prepared herself for suspicion, not understanding. A man near the coffee station muttered, if it is worth arguing over, maybe somebody already knows it is a winner. Another customer lifted a phone higher, pretending to check messages while the camera lens remained pointed toward the register. Naomi felt heat creep into her face. She hated becoming a spectacle. Caleb always asked why strangers stared whenever she struggled to calm his coughing fits in public. She never had a good answer. Linda reached beneath the counter and pressed a small button. I am calling my manager. That is reasonable, Ethan replied. He slipped both hands into the pockets of his overcoat and stepped back, giving Naomi more space instead of less. The gesture was small, but she noticed it. Most people close distance during conflict. He deliberately removed pressure from the moment. Within 2 minutes, the store manager hurried from the stockroom carrying a tablet. Marcus Green was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s whose reading glasses always seemed to slide halfway down his nose. What happened? He asked. Linda explained everything as carefully as she could. Marcus frowned, then opened the transaction history on the register. $1 lottery ticket sold at 11:22 this morning, he read aloud. That does not tell us who purchased it. He sighed and looked toward the security monitor mounted near the office door. The screen flickered before freezing on a grainy image of an empty aisle. Marcus rubbed his forehead. We have been waiting 3 days for the repair company. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. Of course the camera was broken. Of course today would be the day it mattered. Ethan glanced briefly at the frozen monitor, but showed no frustration. Is there another camera? Marcus shook his head. Only the parking lot, and it does not cover the register. Silence settled over the front of the store. It was broken only by the low hum of refrigeration units and the distant beep of another register serving impatient shoppers. Naomi looked down at her grocery bag resting beside her feet. Caleb would be getting off the school bus in less than 45 minutes. Mrs. Patterson from the apartment across the hall was watching him until Naomi returned, but the older woman had her own doctor's appointment at noon. Time was slipping away 1 minute at a time. I have to pick up my son, Naomi said softly. I cannot stay here all afternoon. Ethan studied her face carefully. How old is he? 6. Is he waiting alone? No. A neighbor is helping me. Ethan nodded again, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. Children should never pay the price for adult problems. The words landed differently than she expected. They sounded practiced, not rehearsed, as though they came from experience instead of sympathy. Marcus folded his arms. Nobody is accusing anybody of stealing. We simply need enough information to know what happened. Ethan reached into his wallet and removed a simple white business card. There was no flashy logo, no gold lettering, only his name and a phone number printed in clean black type. He placed it gently on the counter instead of handing it directly to Naomi. "You have my word," he said. "If the ticket belongs to you, I will personally apologize and walk away." He paused before adding, "If it belongs to me, I only ask that you let the truth decide." Naomi looked at the card without touching it. Something about the conversation felt strangely uneven. A man dressed like him should have been worried about money, yet he had never once asked whether the ticket was a winner. Not once. His attention never left the piece of cardboard itself. As her eyes drifted back toward the half-scratched ticket lying on the counter, a quiet question formed in the corner of her mind. If it was not the prize he wanted, then what was hidden on that ticket that mattered so much? Marcus carefully picked up the unfinished ticket by its edges, turning it over beneath the bright fluorescent lights as though another answer might suddenly appear. The back showed only a printed serial number, a barcode, and a small blank space where nothing had been written. He laid it back on the counter with a quiet sigh. "We are not going to solve this standing here guessing." Naomi glanced toward the large clock hanging above the refrigerated drinks. 11:35. Mrs. Patterson would need to leave in less than half an hour. Caleb always tried to act brave when adults were late, but she knew he counted every passing minute by watching the hallway through the apartment peephole. She reached into her purse for her phone and sent a quick message. "Running late. Please tell Caleb I am on my way. Thank you." The reply arrived almost immediately. "He is okay. Do not rush." Relief loosened the tightness in her chest, if only a little. Marcus leaned against the counter. "Here is what we can do. We leave the ticket exactly as it is. Nobody scratches another inch. I will contact the lottery office and ask how situations like this are handled." Linda nodded in agreement. "That sounds fair." Ethan looked at Naomi instead of Marcus. "Would you be comfortable with that?" She studied him for a long moment. Most people would have spoken to the manager. He kept speaking to her. "Yes," she answered quietly, "if that is the only honest way forward." A faint smile touched the corner of Ethan's mouth before disappearing almost as quickly as it had come. "Thank you." Marcus placed the ticket inside a clear plastic evidence envelope normally used for disputed transactions involving gift cards or checks. He sealed it carefully and wrote the date and time across the top. The simple action somehow made the little piece of cardboard seem far more important than it had a few minutes earlier. A young employee walked past pushing a cart filled with bottled water and slowed just enough to whisper, "Do you think it is the jackpot ticket?" Another employee shrugged. "Maybe. Otherwise, why would anybody care this much?" Naomi heard every word. She wanted to explain that she had not even finished scratching it. She had no idea whether it was worth $1 or $1 million. Yet somehow that fact no longer felt like the center of the argument. Ethan's attention had never drifted toward the prize chart printed on the display behind the counter. His eyes always returned to the ticket itself. Marcus finally broke the silence. "Miss Brooks, would you mind waiting while I make one phone call?" Naomi blinked. "You know my name?" Marcus smiled apologetically. "Your debit card displayed it during the purchase." She had forgotten she had used the last $11 from her account to pay for the groceries. Ethan remained silent, but Naomi noticed the brief flicker of recognition in his expression when he heard her full name. It vanished so quickly she wondered if she had imagined it. Marcus disappeared into the office. The front of the store gradually returned to its ordinary rhythm. Shopping carts rolled across the tile floor. A little girl pleaded with her father for chocolate milk. An elderly couple debated which cereal was on sale. Life moved forward as though nothing unusual had happened. Naomi picked up her grocery bag. "I should probably leave once the manager comes back." Ethan nodded. "You have responsibilities." "Everybody does. Some people forget that." His answer carried a quiet weight that lingered between them. Naomi looked at him more carefully than before. His overcoat was expensive. His watch probably cost more than her yearly rent. Yet there were faint shadows beneath his eyes, the kind left by too many sleepless nights rather than too many late parties. Wealth could hide many things, but exhaustion rarely lied. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. If that ticket really belongs to you." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Why did you not simply buy another one? Ethan looked toward the sealed envelope resting on the counter. For several seconds, he said nothing at all. Finally, he answered in a voice so calm it almost blended into the soft music playing through the store speakers. Because there is only one like that. Naomi frowned. They print thousands every day. Not that one. Before she could ask what he meant, Marcus hurried back from the office carrying a small notepad. The Lottery Commission cannot make a decision today, he announced. They need the ticket, the transaction records, and written statements from everyone involved. Naomi's shoulders sank. More waiting. More uncertainty. Marcus continued. They also asked one very interesting question. Ethan lifted his eyes. What question? Marcus looked from Ethan to Naomi before answering. They wanted to know whether anyone had checked the serial number against the original activation log, because according to their system, he stopped, staring down at the notes in his hand as confusion spread across his face. That ticket should never have been available for sale in the first place. The words settled over the checkout counter with the quiet force of a storm rolling in from miles away. Marcus looked up from his notepad as though he hoped someone else might explain what he had just heard. The representative said the serial number was marked as inactive when it left the distribution center, he said slowly. According to their records, this ticket should not have been scanned or sold today. Linda frowned in disbelief. That does not make any sense. I scanned it myself. The register accepted it. Marcus nodded. I told them exactly that. They want their investigations department to compare the activation records with the register log before anyone scratches the rest of the ticket. Naomi felt another layer of uncertainty settle over an already impossible morning. Just minutes earlier, she had believed the problem was deciding who owned the ticket. Now the ticket itself had become a mystery. Ethan remained remarkably calm. His eyes rested briefly on the sealed evidence envelope before shifting toward Marcus. How long will that investigation take? Possibly until tomorrow, Marcus admitted. Maybe longer if they need records from the distributor. Naomi's heart sank. Tomorrow felt like another lifetime. Her phone vibrated inside her purse. She glanced down and saw Mrs. Patterson's name. She answered immediately. Everything is all right. The older woman assured her before Naomi could speak. Caleb is drawing dinosaurs at my kitchen table. But honey, his cough sounds a little worse today. Naomi closed her eyes for a second. I will be there as soon as I can. Drive safely. Do not worry about me. The call ended, but the words lingered in Naomi's mind. His cough sounds a little worse today. Ethan had not tried to overhear the conversation, yet something in her expression seemed to tell him enough. Your son is sick, he said quietly. She nodded once. He has good days and difficult days. And today, I will not know until I get home. Marcus slid the sealed envelope into a small locked drawer beneath the counter. Nobody touches this until the Lottery Commission contacts us again. He looked apologetically toward Naomi. Miss Brooks, I know this has disrupted your entire morning. She forced a tired smile. Life has been doing that for a while. For the first time since they met, Ethan looked genuinely unsettled. It lasted only a heartbeat before the composed expression returned, but Naomi noticed it. She had spent years reading tiny changes in Caleb's face before an asthma attack became visible. She had learned that the smallest expressions often carried the biggest truths. Marcus handed each of them a simple incident report to sign. Naomi carefully read every line before adding her signature in neat block letters. Ethan did the same without asking for special treatment. There was something strangely reassuring about that. Wealth often expected shortcuts. He accepted procedure without complaint. Once everything had been signed, Marcus locked the paperwork inside the same drawer. You are both free to go. If we learn anything, I will call immediately. Naomi reached for her grocery bag. Ethan waited until she had lifted it before speaking again. Do you have transportation? The city bus. It is starting to rain. She glanced toward the front windows. Tiny drops had begun tapping softly against the glass, turning the bright parking lot into a blurred watercolor of gray pavement and reflected brake lights. I have walked in worse weather, she replied with a faint smile. I am sure you have. There was no judgment in his voice, only quiet recognition. They stepped outside together. The cool autumn air carried the clean scent that always arrived just before steady rain. Naomi adjusted the thin sweater wrapped around her shoulders and started toward the bus stop at the edge of the parking lot. Miss Brooks. She turned back. Ethan stood beside a black sedan parked several spaces away. A driver had already stepped out and quietly opened the rear door, but Ethan made no move toward the car. "Would you allow me to drive you home?" Naomi immediately shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, but I do not think that is a good idea." He accepted the answer without argument. "Fair enough." She began walking again before hearing his voice one final time. "One more thing." She looked over her shoulder. Ethan's eyes met hers across the light ring. "Whether that ticket belongs to you or me, I hope your son has a better afternoon than your morning." Naomi offered the smallest nod before continuing toward the bus stop. She did not notice the black sedan remain exactly where it was instead of driving away. Inside the car, Ethan watched until the city bus disappeared into traffic. Only then did he speak to the driver. "Do not follow too closely." The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Sir." Ethan looked back toward the rain-soaked street where the bus had vanished. "I need to understand how a woman who refused to claim what might have been millions ended up with only $1 left in her wallet." The city bus hissed to a stop 3 blocks from Naomi's apartment building, releasing passengers into a cold afternoon drizzle that seemed determined to soak everything it touched. She pulled the hood of her faded sweatshirt over her braided hair, tucked the small grocery bag closer to her side, and hurried down the cracked sidewalk. Every minute mattered. Caleb never complained, but she knew he counted the hours until she came home. Apartment 4C smelled faintly of cinnamon when Naomi unlocked the door. Mrs. Patterson was sitting at the tiny kitchen table with Caleb, who was proudly coloring an enormous green dinosaur that took up nearly the entire page. His bright smile appeared the moment he saw his mother. "Mom," he shouted before another cough interrupted the word. Naomi crossed the room in 2 quick steps and knelt beside him. Her hand rested gently against his forehead. "No fever, thank goodness." "How are you feeling, buddy?" Caleb shrugged with the bravery children somehow found even when they felt miserable. "Better now." Mrs. Patterson smiled kindly as she gathered her purse. "He ate half a peanut butter sandwich, but the coughing started again about an hour ago." Naomi nodded gratefully. "Thank you for staying longer." The elderly woman squeezed her shoulder. "You would have done the same for me." After the door closed, the apartment became quiet except for the old radiator clicking against the wall and Caleb's crayons scratching across the paper. Naomi unpacked the bread and eggs, carefully placing them inside a refrigerator that looked far emptier than she wished. Caleb noticed immediately. "Did you forget the medicine?" he asked innocently. Naomi forced a smile. "They were out of the kind I wanted." The lie settled heavily inside her chest. She hated lying to him, even about small things. Caleb accepted the answer without question. Children trusted long before they understood sacrifice. "Can I show you something?" he asked excitedly. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded worksheet covered with gold stars. "Mrs. Ellis said I read the whole story by myself." Naomi's tired eyes filled with genuine warmth. "I knew you could do it." Caleb beamed. "She says I am getting faster every week." Naomi hugged him tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of crayons, laundry soap, and the mint shampoo he insisted made him smell like superheroes. Moments like these reminded her why she never allowed herself to quit, no matter how impossible life became. Later that evening, after Caleb fell asleep curled beneath his dinosaur blanket, Naomi opened her aging laptop on the small kitchen table. The screen flickered twice before finally coming to life. She searched through dozens of old job applications, updating another resume she had already sent to nearly every accounting firm within 30 miles. Her bachelor's degree in accounting still hung proudly on the apartment wall, framed above a bookshelf that held more library books than decorations. She had graduated near the top of her class. 3 years earlier, she had been a staff accountant with promising evaluations and a future she believed was secure. Then Caleb's medical appointments became more frequent. Missed work became unpaid leave. Unpaid leave became termination. Every decision she made afterward had been about keeping her son healthy, even if it meant giving up the career she had worked so hard to build. She submitted another application before the familiar message appeared. "Thank you for your interest. Only selected candidates will be contacted." Naomi closed the laptop with a quiet sigh. Across the city, Ethan Carter sat alone inside the top-floor office of Carter Capital, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking thousands of glowing lights stretching across the skyline. His executive assistant stepped inside, carrying a thin folder. "You asked for the background report, sir." Ethan accepted it without looking up. "Thank you, Denise." After she quietly left, he opened the file. Naomi Brooks, Bachelor of Science in Accounting, Certified Public Accountant, former Senior Staff Accountant at Hallbrook Financial Services. Employment ended 18 months earlier. Current work history: grocery inventory clerk, evening restaurant cashier, temporary bookkeeping assignments. Ethan frowned. None of it made sense. Someone with her qualifications should not have been struggling to buy bread and eggs. He continued reading until one line stopped him completely. Employment separation reason: repeated absences due to dependent medical care. Ethan slowly leaned back in his chair. Earlier that day, she had refused to claim a ticket that could have changed her life overnight. Now another question quietly replaced every other thought in his mind. If Naomi Brooks had sacrificed her career to protect her son instead of protecting herself, what else had she been forced to give up that no report could ever measure? The next morning began before sunrise with the sound Naomi had learned to fear. Caleb's cough echoed through the small apartment, deeper than it had been the night before, each breath followed by a faint wheeze that tightened her chest almost as much as his. She was beside his bed before he fully opened his eyes, gently helping him sit upright the way his doctor had taught her. "Slow breaths, buddy," she whispered, rubbing small circles across his back. "You are doing great." Caleb nodded bravely, trying to smile between breaths. "I am okay, Mom." She wished she believed him. After using the last dose from his inhaler, his breathing gradually settled, but Naomi knew the prescription needed to be refilled that day. She opened her banking application one more time, hoping some forgotten deposit had appeared overnight. The screen displayed exactly what she already knew: 29 cents. Her paycheck from the grocery store would not arrive until Friday. It was only Tuesday. She quietly closed the application before Caleb could notice. 2 hours later, after dropping him at school with strict instructions for the nurse to call immediately if his breathing worsened, Naomi was stocking shelves during the morning shift at the neighborhood grocery store where she worked part-time. She carefully arranged canned vegetables while mentally calculating which bill could be postponed another week. Rent, electricity, prescription. Every option ended with something she could not afford to lose. Her phone vibrated inside her apron pocket. The caller identification showed an unfamiliar number. "Miss Brooks?" a calm woman's voice asked after Naomi answered. "This is Karen Ellis from the State Lottery Investigations Office. We have completed the first review regarding yesterday's disputed ticket. We would appreciate it if you could return to Miller's Market this afternoon." Naomi gripped the edge of the shelf. Was there a decision? There was a brief pause. "Yes. The activation records have now been verified." Naomi held her breath. The ticket was legally purchased under Mr. Ethan Carter's transaction. For several seconds, the sounds of the store faded into the background. Shopping carts rolled past. Children laughed near the cereal aisle. Somewhere a cashier announced a price check over the loudspeaker. None of it seemed real. "I understand," Naomi finally answered, though the words felt strangely distant. "Thank you for letting me know." She ended the call and stood perfectly still. The tiny hope she had never allowed herself to fully embrace quietly slipped away. Millions of dollars had never truly belonged to her. Yet somehow losing something she had never possessed still hurt. Her manager noticed her expression. "Everything all right, Naomi?" She forced a small smile. "Just a family matter." At 3 o'clock, she returned to Miller's Market. The same fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The same checkout lane stood waiting. Marcus greeted her with genuine sympathy. "I am sorry, Miss Brooks." He unlocked the drawer beneath the register and removed the sealed evidence envelope. "The investigation confirmed the ticket belongs to Mr. Carter." Naomi nodded before he finished speaking. "I already know." Marcus looked surprised. "They called you?" "Yes." He handed her a copy of the report anyway. Every transaction time, barcode record, and register log matched Ethan's purchase. During yesterday's confusion, the tickets had been accidentally exchanged before either customer realized it. It had been an honest mistake from beginning to end. Naomi folded the report without reading every page. She did not need more proof. The truth was already difficult enough. The front door opened quietly behind her. Ethan stepped inside wearing the same calm expression, though the shadows beneath his eyes seemed darker than before. Marcus handed him the evidence envelope. Everything has been verified. Ethan accepted it, but made no attempt to open it. Instead, he looked toward Naomi. Thank you for coming back. She gave a tired nod. Congratulations. I hope it turns out to be worth something. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly before answering. The money was never what mattered. Naomi almost smiled at the familiar sentence before remembering she no longer had the energy to ask questions. Whatever was important to you, she said softly. I am glad you got it back. She adjusted the worn strap of her purse and turned toward the exit. Outside, the afternoon sky had darkened with heavy clouds. At that exact moment, her phone rang again. This time, the caller identification displayed the name of Caleb's elementary school. Naomi answered immediately. The school nurse spoke gently but urgently. Miss Brooks, Caleb is having trouble catching his breath again. We think it would be best if you came right away. Naomi's face lost all color. Without another word, she hurried toward the door, unaware that Ethan had heard every sentence. He watched her disappear into the parking lot, clutching a purse that carried almost nothing except responsibility, and for the first time in years the object resting inside the sealed envelope felt far less valuable than the mother who had just walked away from it. Naomi reached Caleb's elementary school in less than 15 minutes, though she could not remember a single traffic light along the way. Her mind had narrowed to one thought, and one thought only. Please let him be breathing. The school nurse was already waiting outside the health office when Naomi hurried down the hallway. He is stable, she said reassuringly before Naomi could ask. His oxygen level improved after we followed his asthma action plan, but I really think he should be seen by his pediatrician today. Relief washed through Naomi so quickly that her knees almost gave way. She stepped into the small room where Caleb sat on the examination cot, clutching his stuffed dinosaur against his chest. His smile appeared the instant he saw her. I told Miss Jenkins you would come. Naomi wrapped her arms around him carefully. I will always come. Caleb leaned against her shoulder. I am sorry I scared everybody. You never have to apologize for needing help. Those words were as much for herself as they were for him. 30 minutes later, they sat in the waiting room of Mercy Family Clinic. The familiar scent of disinfectant mixed with fresh coffee drifted through the reception area, while parents quietly entertained restless children with coloring books and whispered stories. Naomi filled out another insurance form, already knowing the answer before she reached the payment section. Outstanding balance. The receptionist offered an understanding smile. Dr. Lewis will still see Caleb today. We can discuss the billing afterward. Naomi thanked her, though gratitude carried its own quiet weight when it had to be repeated too often. Dr. Lewis completed the examination with his usual calm patience. After listening carefully to Caleb's lungs, he removed his stethoscope and pulled his chair closer. His breathing has improved since this morning, but I am concerned these episodes are becoming more frequent. Naomi nodded silently. The maintenance inhaler should not have run out, he continued gently. Has there been any difficulty refilling the prescription? She hesitated just long enough for the truth to answer before she did. I was waiting until payday. Dr. Lewis lowered his eyes for a brief moment. There was no judgment in his expression, only quiet understanding earned from years of treating families who carried impossible choices home every night. I have a few sample inhalers left from a community health program, he said. They are not a permanent solution, but they will cover the next few weeks. Naomi blinked rapidly. Doctor, I cannot. You are accepting help for Caleb, he interrupted softly. Not for yourself. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. As they left the examination room, Caleb looked up at her with wide brown eyes. Does this mean I can still play at recess tomorrow? Naomi smiled for the first time all day. If Dr. Lewis says yes. He did. Caleb grinned so brightly that even the gray afternoon outside seemed a little warmer. Across town, Ethan Carter sat through the quarterly board meeting without hearing half the conversation. Charts filled the presentation screen. Executives debated market forecasts, acquisitions, and projected earnings. Normally, he noticed every detail. Today, his thoughts remained fixed on a woman who had walked away from a lottery ticket without asking for sympathy and a little boy he had never met. Mr. Carter, his chief financial officer asked. Ethan looked up. I apologize. Would you repeat that? The room fell unusually quiet. His executive assistant had worked beside him for 8 years and had never once seen him lose focus during a meeting. Afterward, as everyone filed out, Denise remained behind. Sir, may I ask you something? Ethan nodded. You have been distracted since yesterday. She chose her words carefully. Does this have something to do with the incident report you requested? Ethan walked toward the window overlooking the city. Do you know what surprised me most? Denise waited. Not that Naomi Brooks returned the ticket. He looked down at the crowded streets far below. It was the way she congratulated me after learning it was mine. She had every reason to resent me, yet she wished me well. Denise folded her hands thoughtfully. Some people measure wealth differently. Ethan remained silent for several seconds before speaking again. Run a deeper background review on Holbrook Financial Services. She looked mildly surprised. The accounting firm? Yes. May I ask why? Ethan thought about the employment report lying on his desk, about the words repeated in his mind since the previous evening. Employment ended due to dependent medical care. Because I have a feeling Naomi Brooks did not simply lose her job. He turned away from the window, his voice calm but unmistakably determined. I think she lost something much larger, and I want to know who benefited from it. The report arrived on Ethan's desk just after 7 the following morning in a plain gray folder with no company logo on the cover. Denise rarely looked unsettled by paperwork, but this time she closed the office door before setting it down. You were right, she said quietly. There is more to Naomi Brooks's story. Ethan opened the folder without speaking. The first pages contained employment records he had already seen. Performance evaluations, attendance reports, salary history. Every review described Naomi with nearly identical language. Accurate, dependable, ethical, exceptionally detail-oriented. One supervisor had written that she possessed the rare ability to identify financial inconsistencies before software systems detected them. Ethan continued reading until a different document caught his attention. It was an internal memorandum dated just over 18 months earlier. Subject: Expense Reconciliation Exception. The attached notes showed that Naomi had questioned several unusually large consulting payments connected to one of Holbrook Financial Services' corporate clients. She had requested additional documentation before approving the entries. Ethan frowned. Who was the client? Denise slid another page toward him. Carter Capital. The room became completely silent. Ethan read the line again, certain he had misunderstood it the first time. The consulting payments had been submitted by one of Carter Capital's regional subsidiaries during a period when the company had been acquiring several smaller businesses. According to the records, Naomi had flagged inconsistencies involving duplicate invoices and unexplained transfers. Her supervisor had instructed her to process the payments anyway. Ethan slowly looked up. Did she refuse? Denise nodded. Based on the email archive, yes. She opened another section of the folder. She documented her concerns in writing and requested an internal review. 3 weeks later, her attendance issues became part of her performance file. Ethan already knew what came next before reading another word. Caleb's medical appointments had forced Naomi to miss work several times during the investigation. The absences provided management with a legal reason to terminate her employment before any formal review of the disputed transactions could move forward. There was no evidence that anyone had directly fired her for asking difficult questions. Instead, the system had quietly allowed circumstances to accomplish the same result. Ethan leaned back slowly. The room suddenly felt much smaller than before. What happened to the accounting review? Denise answered softly. It was closed after Naomi left the company. Were the transactions ever investigated? Not according to anything we found. Ethan removed his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. For years, he had believed strong policies guaranteed ethical decisions. Yet somewhere beneath layers of procedures and reporting structures, a woman had lost her career after choosing honesty over convenience. She had never asked for recognition. She had simply disappeared from the system. Denise hesitated before speaking again. There is one more document. She handed him a photocopy of Naomi's final email to her supervisor. The message was brief. I understand the company's decision. I appreciate the opportunities one have been given. I hope the reconciliation issues I reported receive proper attention because accurate records protect everyone. Thank you. Ethan read the final sentence twice. No anger. No accusations. No threats. Even while losing everything she had worked for, Naomi's concern remained the integrity of the records rather than her own reputation. He slowly folded the page and returned it to the file. She never stopped acting like a professional, he said quietly. Denise nodded. Most people in her position would have hired an attorney if they could afford one. Ethan looked out across the skyline where the morning sun reflected from hundreds of office windows. She probably could not. His phone vibrated. Marcus Green's name appeared on the screen. Ethan answered immediately. "Good morning, Marcus." "Morning, Mr. Carter. I thought you should know something." Ethan listened carefully. The lottery commission completed the final review of the ticket. And the ticket was not a winner. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Somewhere across the city, Naomi was beginning another long workday, believing she had lost the chance to change her life forever. She had walked away with nothing except another difficult afternoon waiting for her at home. Yet the realization brought him no relief at all. In fact, it sharpened something else entirely. The ticket had never been the real test. The test had been character. Naomi had passed without ever knowing she was being measured. Ethan thanked Marcus and ended the call. Then he picked up the folder one final time, his decision already made. "Denise," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "schedule a meeting with the board this afternoon. Then find Naomi Brooks." Denise looked up. "What would you like me to tell her?" Ethan glanced once more at the final email she had written before her career quietly collapsed beneath the weight of doing the right thing. "Tell her I am not calling about a lottery ticket," he said. "I am calling because my company owes her the truth." 3 days later, Naomi stood outside Carter Capital with one hand resting lightly on Caleb's shoulder, wondering if she had somehow walked into the wrong building. The glass tower reflected the clear autumn sky above downtown Chicago, its polished entrance framed by quiet fountains and rows of neatly trimmed maple trees glowing with red and gold leaves. Caleb looked up at the towering building with wide eyes. "Mom, do people really work all the way up there?" Naomi smiled despite her nerves. "I guess they do." She had almost declined the invitation when Denise called. She assumed it was another conversation about the lottery ticket until Denise gently explained that the ticket had not won anything. The meeting, she insisted, was about something entirely different. Ethan greeted them himself in the lobby instead of sending an assistant. He crouched to Caleb's height with an easy smile. "You must be Caleb." The little boy nodded shyly while clutching his dinosaur backpack. "Dr. Lewis says I can go back to recess." Ethan smiled. "That sounds like very good news." Moments later, they sat inside a conference room overlooking the city. There were no reporters, no photographers, and no attorneys waiting around the table. Only Ethan, Denise, Naomi, and a thick folder resting quietly in front of him. Ethan took a slow breath before speaking. "Miss Brooks, I owe you an apology that has nothing to do with the ticket." Naomi looked at him with quiet confusion. Ethan slid the folder across the table. "After we met, I asked my team to review your employment history. I discovered that while working as an accountant, you questioned financial records connected to one of my company's subsidiaries. You did exactly what an honest accountant should do." Naomi stared at the papers without opening them. Ethan continued. "Instead of receiving support, you lost your position before your concerns could be investigated. The system protected itself instead of protecting the truth." Naomi slowly opened the folder. Inside were copies of the emails she had written, the reports she had prepared, and documents she had not seen since the day she packed the few belongings from her desk into a cardboard box. She remembered thinking no one would ever read them again. Ethan's voice remained steady. "An independent audit confirmed the discrepancies you reported. Several managers ignored proper procedures. They are no longer employed by Carter Capital or its affiliated companies. New compliance policies have already been implemented." Naomi looked up, still struggling to process everything she was hearing. "You did all of this because of one conversation in a grocery store?" Ethan shook his head gently. "No. I did it because one honest person reminded me that leadership is measured by what happens to people I never see." Silence settled softly across the room. Caleb looked between the adults without fully understanding the conversation, though he instinctively reached for his mother's hand. Ethan placed one final envelope on the table. "There is one more thing." Naomi looked at it cautiously. "This is not charity," Ethan said before she could misunderstand. "It is an offer." Inside was a formal employment agreement. Senior Financial Compliance Manager. Flexible scheduling. Full medical benefits beginning immediately. A salary that exceeded anything Naomi had earned before. Beneath the offer was a handwritten note in Ethan's careful script. "Integrity should never cost someone their future." Naomi read the page twice before quietly shaking her head. I have been out of corporate accounting for almost 2 years. Ethan smiled. Your knowledge can be refreshed. Your character cannot be taught. Tears gathered in Naomi's eyes, but she quickly brushed them away. I do not know what to say. Ethan glanced toward Caleb, who was quietly drawing another dinosaur on a notepad Denise had found for him. Just promise me one thing. Naomi waited. The next time someone like you raises a concern inside this company, make sure they never have to choose between honesty and feeding their family. Naomi slowly nodded. I can promise that. 6 months later, the small apartment with the leaking radiator had been replaced by a modest townhouse closer to Caleb's school and medical clinic. His health improved with consistent treatment, and his laughter once again filled their home more often than coughing did. At Carter Capital, Naomi became known not for the hardship she had survived, but for the fairness she brought to every decision. Employees quietly learned that if she asked a difficult question, she was protecting the company rather than challenging it. Ethan established a family medical assistance fund for employees caring for seriously ill children, ensuring no parent would lose a career simply because their child needed them. One autumn afternoon, Naomi stopped at Miller's Market on her way home. While paying for groceries, she noticed a young mother standing behind her counting coins with trembling fingers before quietly putting a bottle of children's medicine back on the shelf. Without saying a word, Naomi handed her cashier an extra $20 bill. Please add that medicine to her purchase. The young mother turned in surprise, her eyes already filling with grateful tears. Naomi simply smiled and picked up her grocery bags. As she stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, she reached into her coat pocket and felt a single folded $1 bill she had kept ever since that unforgettable morning. Once, it had represented the last thing she owned. Now it reminded her of something far more valuable. Hope had never come from the lottery ticket. It had come from choosing honesty when no one was watching, and from discovering that true wealth begins the moment kindness refuses to look away. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need it today. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Leave a few words in the comments and let me know what this story meant to you, or what part stayed with you the most. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. Until next time, take care of yourself. God bless you.